Hello, my name's Mrs. Tyler, and today we're going to do some GCSE revision where we're going to make a knowledge organiser on evolution. It's going to look a bit like this, so you can see that we are going to be doing about variation, and then we're going to do about the process of evolution, antibiotic resistance as an example of evolution, and then fossils as evidence for evolution. This is on dual award and triple. You can see there's a lot of content, and it's a common 5-mark question. So let's get started. So as always, I'm going to start with my title in the middle, which is evolution. I'm going to divide the page in half. And then I'm going to have a short section at the top, probably about a quarter, maybe a bit less than a quarter. And I've got a nice long one here. And this side I'm going to divide into a third and 2/3. So a slightly bigger section there and a slightly smaller section there. This section we're going to remind ourselves what variation is and how it's caused. In this section we're going to be talking about the process of evolution. In this section we're going to be giving an example of evolution, the development of antibiotic resistance. And in this last one, we're going to give a piece of evidence for evolution, which is the fossil record or fossils. So there are 4 sections for today. Just draw boxes around them all. Let's start with variation then. Variation just means differences between individuals of the same species. So all organisms of the same species have differences. And these differences are really important. As we said, if you've done the inheritance video, these differences mean that some individuals, some offspring will survive and pass on their genes, which is really important. The causes of those differences, though, can be environmental, or genetic. So by environmental variation, we mean differences that are caused by the conditions in which you live. So variation caused by the conditions you live in. So in plants, their growth is going to be affected by the amount of light. That would be an environmental variation. In humans, if you're brought up in one country speaking one language, and the chances are the language you speak is going to be, or you're going to speak some of the language that you've been taught. So language is environmental. So e.g. light and language in humans. Genetic variation then, as the name suggests, is variation caused by genes. And remember that a gene is a section of DNA that codes for a protein. So some people have different proteins to others. So examples of genetic variation that are inherited from parents are things like blood group, and eye colour. They're only genetic. They've been handed down in your genes from your parents. Another type we can get genetic variation is by mutation. And this is when there is a change in the DNA. giving a different protein. Change in DNA making different protein. In reality, though, lots of factors aren't just environmental or genetic. In reality, lots of factors are both. They are a combination of environment and inherited or genetic characteristics. For example, weight has an obvious environmental factor, depends on the amount of food you've eaten, but also there are quite complicated genetics based around metabolism and appetite. So that influences it. Intelligence, however you want to measure it, will have both factors. Sporting ability will have both factors. So in reality, most variation is actually caused by both. So let's look at the process of variation then. The process of evolution. And for this, we need to know 6 shun words, words that end in shun, because it's often a 5 or 6 mark question. And I'm going to draw them zigzagging down the page. The first shun word we need to use is mutation. Shun at the end. The next shun word we need to use is variation. The third shun word we need to use is competition. The fourth shun word is selection. The fifth shun word is reproduction. And the sixth shun word is generation. Actually, generations. All right then. So mutation is a random change in DNA that changes the protein. So we said that up there. Mostly mutations are bad, but occasionally they're good. Mostly mutations are bad. They break the protein. For example, the length of a giraffe's neck. And we're going to have to draw a giraffe now. So there's my grass. There's the giraffe's body. I'm going to draw a stick giraffe. There's its legs. And I'm going to give this giraffe a nice long neck. And a smiley face. So there's my giraffe. And the mutation is that it's got elongated vertebrae. So it's got a long neck. That single mutation in that single giraffe means that there is more variation in the giraffe population. So different individuals have different characteristics. Here we go again then. I'm going to draw some grass. And this time I'm going to draw 3 giraffes. There's the body of 1. There's the body of number 2. And there's the body of number 3. So these are the giraffes that were there in the beginning. they've got shorter necks. And then we've got our new mutant giraffe with a longer neck. Now, that long neck might be a disadvantage in some ecosystems, but on the African savanna, the giraffes eat leaves. So I'm going to draw a tree with a branch high up with some leaves on it. Again, I'm going to draw my grass. I'm going to draw my long-necked giraffe here and a short-necked giraffe here. Here's my long-necked one. He can eat the leaves. There he is, chomping on the leaves. The short-necked one can't. So competition means that you've got limited resources. Those that are best adapted are going to get them. So competition means limited resources that everybody wants. And that gives rise to selection. And by selection, we mean survival of the fittest. So we're going to draw our grass again. So our long-necked giraffe here is going to survive because he can eat the tree. Sorry, eat the leaves on the tree. I'm going to now try and draw a dead short-necked giraffe. So I'm going to draw it on its back. There's its legs. And I'm going to draw its neck straight out. Crosses for eyes. The short-necked giraffe is not going to survive. It's going to die. So, death for the least well adapted. And if this short giraffe is dead, and in fact all the short giraffes are dead and only the long-necked giraffe survives, then the long-necked giraffe is more likely to have babies. And so the long-necked giraffe, here he is, or she is more likely to have babies. They're probably going to have babies with the short-necked giraffe, and those babies will show variation. There'll be some long-necked babies and some short-necked babies. So they're the offspring. And that means over many generations, the longer neck ones are more likely to survive. They're more likely to have children, which means over long periods of time, the long neck will become more common. Over time, the useful characteristic, in this case, neck of giraffe, becomes more common. Characteristic becomes more common. Onto an example then of evolution, and that's been the development of antibiotic resistance in bacteria. So some bacteria have evolved, that means changed over time, in exactly the same method as we've just spoken about, resistance to antibiotics. In other words, they are not killed by antibiotics? So let's go through our 6-point shun words then. We'll start off with mutation. Remember, a mutation is a random change in the DNA, and this random change in the DNA of the bacteria. Here's my bacteria. Instead of having a smooth cell wall, we're going to pretend it's got a protected cell wall. So the cell wall is different. So the next shun word then is variation. And because this single bacteria has luckily had a mutation that's made it better than the others, this bacteria's got its special cell wall, and all the other bacteria have got a normal smooth cell wall. What that means then, in number 3, the key word was competition. I'm going to put competition and selection together actually. This time, the selection process is the person taking antibiotics. So these bacteria are living in the gut of somebody, and somebody's taken antibiotics. So they're competing for food, but the selection process is the antibiotics. So here's our one with the modified cell wall. He's dead happy. But all the other bacteria are killed by the antibiotic, because some types of antibiotic destroy cell walls. So all these are killed. So antibiotics kill all the normal or the old bacteria. So we now move on to our 4th shun word, which is actually the 5th and last sequence, reproduction. And as bacteria just split in two when they divide, it doesn't need another one to have offspring with, and very quickly all the bacteria will have that special cell wall that stops the antibiotics from killing them. So that's bad news for the person who's infected with these bacteria, but it's also bad news for everyone else on the planet, because over generations, in other words, over lots of time, bacteria can divide every 20 minutes. They will spread very, very rapidly, and they cannot be killed by that antibiotic. So resistant bacteria divide every 20 minutes. So they spread rapidly. So this is a massive issue. All right, and before COVID, this was the thing that the World Health Organization were most worried about and still are very concerned about. Because by giving people with bacterial infections antibiotics, we're selecting the resistant one, which means they're reproducing. We're actually killing all the other bacteria, the ones we can kill, and increasing the number of resistant bacteria, and it's spreading. So more antibiotics leads to more resistance. So really, we need to reduce the use of antibiotics. So number one, antibiotics should only be prescribed for severe bacterial infections. Definitely not viral infections, because antibiotics don't kill viruses. And if you do get given antibiotics, you need to make sure you take the full course. So that there's none left to mutate. So you need to make sure that you take all the bacteria. So before this one mutates, so when they're all like that, you need to make sure you kill them all. And then there's none left to mutate. Lastly then, fossils is our evidence of evolution over long term. We've got evidence from the antibiotic resistance, actually. We've got lots of genetic sequencing that shows the evolution of antibiotic resistance, but we've also got long-term evidence in fossil record. So fossils are simply the remains of plants and animals. And there are three ways that you need to know about fossils being made. I'm going to draw some grass here, so that's the surface, and then I'm going to draw a cliff edge down here. So in the rock, we've got different strata, different layers of rock. And this will be the newest rock up here, and the further down you go, you'll get to older rock, the oldest rock. So the first method of making fossils, which is probably the one you know about, is called gradual replacement. So when an animal dies or a plant dies, the soft tissue decays, rots away. But hard parts like bone and teeth stay. When the animal dies, particularly in an aquatic or a water situation, they get buried in sediment. But even if it happens on the land, they will eventually get buried in sediment, a layer of mud. So as they get buried, minerals leach in. So minerals, remember, are inorganic ions, so things like phosphates and sulfates and nitrates. And they leak out of the surrounding rock into where the bones and teeth were. So let's pretend we've got a fish here. So there's its skull. So layers and layers of sediment build up on top. Minerals leach in over time. And with pressure as well, it turns into a rock-like substance. And the lower down a fossil is found, the older it is. And so we can track evolution by tracking the changes in the bones. Okay, the second type of fossil that you need to know about is when you get a cast or an imprint. This often happens in ancient mud, so it's things like footprints. So I'm going to draw a dinosaur's footprint. So this is usually in ancient mud where the animal has walked. A layer of sediment has formed over the top in exactly the same way as here, but there's no hard parts or rotting. It's just minerals leach in and leave a cavity. And the last sort you need to know about is preserved in low oxygen conditions. So, for example, trapped in tree sap, which makes amber, or bogs, which are acidic. So, Jurassic Park, if you remember, was when they found a mosquito that had been feeding on dinosaur blood. It had landed on a tree and the sap had leaked out of the tree, completely encased it, and it was totally preserved. It hadn't decayed. So there is no decay, or less decay. Right, that's all for this week. So you know your job now is to go away, read, cover, recite, and then put it away and test yourself by having a go at some exam questions.